So hi everybody and welcome to episode 87 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A where your questions and chat really do drive the show. Now, a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us on LinkedIn and YouTube. I can see lots of folks already. Olaposi, welcome, my friend. Please do let us know your name and which city in the world you're joining from. We do love to hear from everybody and get everyone involved. Shanice, Ella, and Adriana are all over in the chat as the social team, and they're going to post a link for you to be able to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course to add your own. We live stream on Mondays at 8 and Fridays at this time, 2 p.m. UK time, to both YouTube and LinkedIn. Now today, as an extra bonus as well, the first 10 people whose live questions are selected to appear in the show, your names will appear in the credits at the end. So do get your questions in early and stay with us to see that happen. Now, today, we're going to be talking about how to become a NIST Cyber Security Professional. With the cost of living rising, there's never been a better time to invest in your own career and secure your personal future. And at the same time, I think to help your organization defend against the dark arts of those malevolent actors seeking to disrupt and to defraud. Joining us today, we've got a highly experienced panel who are going to help us navigate our way through all of this. So let's jump in and meet them. First of all, Mike Battistella is the president of Solutions³. They provide full lifecycle IT management and cybersecurity solutions in both commercial and federal markets. Passionate, I think it's fair to say, about career development, Mike spends his time helping people learn how to build adaptive cyber resilience. So welcome to Level Up, Mike. Great to see you.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm pretty excited about this topic. Specifically, I had 4 cybersecurity interns with me this summer, all going for their master's degree, some hoping to go for their master's degree. And I really appreciate this particular topic because that's a real focus for them, or has been for this summer.
Perfect. And what a brilliant way to help people who are early in their career and also to get all of that energy and new ideas and new thinking into an organization. I think it's a fantastic way to go about it. Returning to Level Up today is David Moskowitz. He is, of course, Executive Director for Content Development over with the DVMS Institute. He works with leaders and experts to create compelling learning materials. And of course, you might remember he's also the lead author of the fundamentals of adopting the NIST Cyber Security Framework book. So welcome back, David. Lovely to see you again.
Hi, thank you, Nick. And the second book in the series, The Practitioner's Guide to Adapting the NIST Cyber Security Framework, is at the publishers. We're completing the final review and anticipating that that book will be available in the fall.
Wow, fantastic. Well, we'll look forward, to picking that up. And also, we might invite you back, David. Maybe you can sign a few copies for us so that we could, reward some contributors, from the audience in the future. That would be really
delighted.
Lovely. Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, there we are. We've already got a giveaway lined up for later on. So job done, everybody. Mart Rovers, he is, of course, president over at INTERPROM. You'll know Mart now. He's a regular contributor to Level Up. He leads a very strong team who are passionate about information security and delivering world-class service management. And of course, he expertly leverages his experience in business relationship management to really help his clients go to that next level. Welcome back, Mark. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, APMG, for having me again. It's a great pleasure. I'd like to say that I think I have the answer to the whole show as far as the question as in how to become a cybersecurity professional. I mean, somebody once said, if you spend more on coffee than on security, you will be hacked. So it's either you spend more on security or you spend less on coffee. So I think we got it squared away.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So it's a great start to the show. Get that balance right. Although I think it's fair to say in the UK, if you go into London, It's really hard. It's really hard to balance your budget because a single shot of espresso can actually cost you quite a bit. Patrick von Schlag, of course, he is also a regular contributor to Level Up. He's a consultant and an educator. And in his role as the president of the Deep Creek Center is focused on helping every client to get the very best return on investment in adopting best practices. And always insightful and completely authentic. Patrick brings so much value to us here at Level Up. So great to see you again. Thank you for rejoining today, Patrick.
Nick, it's wonderful to be back, and I'm really glad to be talking about this topic today, helping organizations not only deal with cyber risk, but helping business stakeholders and boards of directors to understand the role that they need to play in helping to drive this is really critical. And you'll see that the NIST Cyber Security Professional programs really help people to think through the IT business alignment piece.
Excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Now, completing our panel for today is, of course, our question master, and that's Charlotte Miller, who is joining us from the Thames Valley here in the UK. Welcome again, Charlotte. Great to see you.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be here, and we've got lots of live questions ready to ask our panel on what appears to be a very popular topic.
Absolutely right. Well, it's kind of the moment, isn't it, as we're facing a great deal of uncertainty and volatility around the world, and all kinds of things are happening in real time. So I think without further ado, let's jump straight into it, and let's consider our first question, please, Charlotte, if we may.
You can. We have a question from Mary Lee Harper. How does organizational culture impact the development of cybersecurity professionals? Okay,
Patrick, start us off, please.
So many organizations think about cybersecurity as an IT problem, but ultimately it really is an organizational governance issue. It involves every aspect of an organization's executive management, and the organization, as part of establishing its culture, needs to think about cyber risk as organizational business risk. Eventually, while people often think about this as a technology issue, it's really about people. And it's really about helping people move from being a part of effectively your greatest potential vulnerability to being part of a deterrence model. How do we help them be part of the solution instead of part of the problem?
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. David, your thoughts?
One of the things that when we talk about the impact of the development of cybersecurity professionals, you have to consider the overall culture of the organization. Robert Westrom wrote a paper for United States government, National Institutes of Health, about organizational culture. And he provided a taxonomy of 3: toxic, bureaucratic, and generative. And if you think about it for a minute, the difference between those 3 is really very simple. The toxic culture shoots the messenger. The bureaucratic culture ignores the messenger. And the generative culture trains and encourages the messenger. Now, think about that in the context of cybersecurity. After 9/11 happened in the United States, one of the things that appeared in a lot of public transportation and other areas was see something, say something. And that's critical to an organization's ability to be cyber resilient. Well, if that see something, say something is met with shooting the messenger, it impacts the organization. If it's ignored, the same thing occurs. If, on the other hand, people are encouraged and trained to observe, report, and they see that that's consistently acted on, that contributes to allowing the organization to be cyber resilient. And one of the things that Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, said in his book, Hit Refresh, was that in the introduction to the book, he talks about the fact that when the Microsoft board selected him to be the CEO, he recognized that his primary job was to be the curator of culture. That's a CEO function, not an IT function.
Right.
Because it's everybody in the organization that has the responsibility for cyber resilience, not just IT, which dovetails with what Patrick said. It's an enterprise issue, not an IT function.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Mart, we'll take you next, and then we'll hear from Mike.
What a great question, Marie, to start off with this episode. Indeed, just to build on the answers already given, we're talking about culture, we're talking about behaviors. Nothing more powerful if we can have the right culture in an organization around cybersecurity, because then so many other things will be taken care of. I mean, some trends going on these days. You see publications now, children's books are now being published, to make kids aware of cybersecurity, which is very encouraging. Of course, we can just expect over time that our workforce will be much more aware of cyber. So it's no longer this this IT thing. It's just part of life, and it's just how we think, act, our mindset. So there's some encouraging trends going on, but of course we're not there yet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mike, your thoughts, please?
Yes, Nick, I've led a number of incident response teams, and it's very disheartening to be in the front lines of the battle, knowing that just weeks or months before, it's been a different discussion with the executives, talking about what needs to be done, why it needs to be done. And if the executive team has not bought into it, supportive of it, desiring of it, that's passed down through the organization, and it's very sad. As a matter of fact, my stomach gets nauseous, actually, to be honest with you, because then when you're in the front line of an incident and you're responding to it, and they know that they could have done something, and a lot of times it's a cost function. They don't want to spend whatever money to put preventative measures in place, train their people, do the things that would proactively limit their exposure. In the midst of the battle, they'll spend anything, whatever it costs. And typically it's 4 to 5 to 8 times greater in cost than preventative measures.
Okay, excellent. I think that's absolutely right. David, do you want to come back in just before we wrap up on this particular question?
Yeah, very, very quickly, Nick. To Mike's point, one of the things that we do in both the fundamentals and the practitioner book is liken the approach to cybersecurity as an aspect of quality, not IT, but organizational quality, to be able to create, protect, and deliver digital business value. And it costs more, both in reputation as well as in money, as Mike said, to have a cyber incident that's serious than it does to do something about upfront. I mean, I come out of a software development background. It's easier to catch the bug at the beginning and a heck of a lot less expensive to catch it while it's in development than after you've already deployed the thing and it's out in the field. And the same thing is true of cybersecurity. That the issue of approaching cybersecurity as a quality issue changes the thought dynamic within the organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, panel. I just kind of want sort of thought on this. Often, we're caught, aren't we, between considering, what are the values of the organization, the culture of the organization. It's almost like trying to pick up mercury, a little bead of mercury off a glass slate, which, by the way, I don't recommend that anybody does, but nonetheless, quite a tricky thing to kind of get your hold of, and get your head around it in that sense. The one thing that I would say, around culture is that it's really the how we exhibit the values, that we live by. So in an organization, if we have these grandiose value statement, then the culture of the organization is really how we manifest those in our day-to-day work with each other. So let's actually walk the walk, talk the talk, and not just, kind of pay lip service to things. So really very, very good indeed. Charlotte, we've got a huge audience today, and they're very active in social media. So over to you. What's happening on the chat?
Thanks, Nick. We've got lots of people watching today. We've got Martin watching from Glasgow. We've got Diane. Diane's one of our regular contributors, producers to the show. We've also got Gam Elvis from Cameroon joining us. And where else have we got people coming from? David said hello. Hi, David. I think that's one of our colleagues. So hello from Muriel's Inlet, SC, I think that says.
South Carolina, I would guess if I've if I've got my geography is not that great in North America, but I kind of pick up SC, having worked for a little while with a company based in NC. So there you go. If you've figured that out already, then that's really good. So excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Don't forget, get your live questions in early. The first 10 people whose questions are featured on the show, you will also be featured in the credits at the end. So please do put those forward. So Charlotte, on that note, let's take our next question, please.
Nick, we've got a live question that's come in via social media, YouTube. What are some NIST standards that a cybersecurity professional should follow?
Okay, so it might be helpful context, really, to kind of put this into some sort of, place value for everybody in the audience. Mike, start us off, and then we'll hear from Patrick.
Absolutely. So the NIST Cybersecurity framework is kind of the core of what an individual would, and even an organization would look to and adopt. There's the NIST risk management framework. Again, a core. What really takes place is there are a number of special publications associated with NIST. So NIST 853 is a special publication in combination with the NIST Cybersecurity framework, gives you information for how federal governments or government agencies are storing data and things like that. 800-171, how federal contractors are, the kind of controls and compliance requirements they're to adhere to. So those are some of the big ones, and there's a number of others. But the thing that I want to bring up is there are a number of publications that have to do with specific areas. Let me give you an example. NIST 800-128. It's focused on best practices for doing cybersecurity around configuration management. And my point on that is that a lot of times organizations have separated their IT organization and their cybersecurity team, and they're not working together. Oftentimes they're fighting against each other. I bring up the configuration management special publication because that's a great example of where the IT organization is managing the service desk, and they own configuration management. The NIST publication for configuration management shows and documents all the security aspects of configuration management. These two working together give an organization not only the benefits and requirements for configuration management, but the how to do it from a very secure aspect. So organizations or even individuals looking into the NIST standards, especially for cybersecurity, focus on the core, but don't neglect the others. There's a lot of good information out there for professionals.
Okay, thank you so much indeed. Patrick, your thoughts on this, and then we'll hear from David.
So I'd really like to build on what Mike was sharing there. So one of the things about using the NIST cybersecurity framework is it isn't really describing a set of standards that someone must follow in order to achieve some particular organizational credential. It's a framework, and it can, as such, be adapted in certain ways depending upon the size and scale of your organization, the types of risks your organization faces, and your organization's role in the overarching critical infrastructure sector or whatever industry you play in. So as you explore the different types of NIST publications that support the NIST cybersecurity framework, again, Mike alluded to NIST 800-128 for configuration management, but there are literally dozens that provide specific guidance on incident management and incident response planning, on awareness and training programs, on things like asset management and asset controls, and just about every other discipline. And then it really becomes up to you and your own organization to make decisions about how much of that makes sense in your organization's context and how to align and integrate those capabilities with the organization's overall disciplines. So don't bolt on some separate capability, but integrate it effectively into the organization's overall approach.
Thank you so much indeed. And David?
Yep. And just to build on what Mike and Patrick said, and to explicitly address the standards that a cybersecurity professional should follow, it's going to depend to some degree on the market that cybersecurity, or the enterprise that cybersecurity professional is dealing with. If they're dealing with a government entity or somebody that is responsible for handling classified information, then they have to be intimately familiar with NIST 853. If they're going to be doing assessments of the implementation of 853, then they need to look at 853A. If they're dealing with organizations that deal with controlled but unclassified information, now we're talking about 800.171. So the real issue is not trying to deal with the depth and breadth of the NIST cybersecurity or the NIST cybersecurity standards. And to Patrick's point, there's a difference between the framework that addresses critical infrastructure and the others that are numbered publications that Mike and I have mentioned that are standards. But the key is what's applicable to what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, the
Excellent.
853 is huge. It's got like 400 some odd controls in it. 171 has a little over 100. The organization that is smaller, not handling classified information, doesn't need to deal with eating the entire elephant.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Thanks very much indeed, David. And look, this is quite it can appear sometimes very technical, very detailed kind of thing, all right? And you may be feeling a little overwhelmed. So the first thing is, let's just kind of summarize some of the advice that was given here. First of all, it's a framework. So the English phrase now, rather than the US phrase, it depends, is going to play in quite a bit. And secondly, if you want to reach out to any of the panel, you can do so really easily. Just go to our website, look up the event, okay? You'll find a little link which will take you to their LinkedIn profile. So please do. I know everybody's very generous with their time on the panel. Please do connect with them. Don't sell them anything. It's not what we're here for. Okay? So don't do a pitch to us. But nonetheless, if you actually just want to reach out and connect with us, then please do feel free to do that. All right, very good. Now we've got the live questions really stacking up. So Charlotte, we're going to pick up the pace, and panel, we're going to pick up the pace a little, if we may. And let's take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from one of our live viewers. Any recommendation for managing contract employees in the context of managing cyber risk?
Yeah, how do you help contractors to feel part and own the solution that you're trying to implement? David, start us off, and then we'll hear from Patrick.
All right, real quickly, set expectations. Before you deal with contract employees, before you accept them, make sure that they know what you expect and begin to integrate them and let them know how the culture of your organization, see something, say something, surface it, make sure they understand and operate within those expectations.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And let's go to Mart next, if we can do, please, and hear your thoughts on this.
Quickly, based on my own experience as a trainer and consultant being brought in as a contractor, I always appreciate when an organization says, we need a background check. Sometimes they even do fingerprinting. Need to be familiar with some of the policies, information security policy and acceptable use policy, and then take the test, right? Put this to test as in, do you really get it? Do you really pay attention? And then make sure you pass that test. So these are some things that I always appreciate.
Absolutely right. Thank you so much. And Patrick, your thoughts, please.
So it's very important to think about contractors as an extension of your organization's people and culture. And so when you're considering both training programs and onboarding, as well as broader awareness programs, you need to think about how you set those expectations, similar to what Mart and David said, but also how you start bringing them into your organization's culture around see something, say something, and also make sure that you're following other good practices around least privilege, least access to things that are only needed, so that their access controls are rigorously managed and you're not creating excess opportunity for a contractor to gain access to things that they don't need or shouldn't have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much indeed. Excellent. Very good. And just on that front, I think I completely agree, with what we've just heard. One of the most refreshing things is when you actually include the contractor community in your professional development work and make them feel, genuinely to be investable. Right. The more that you invest in people, the more they're likely to do the right thing for you in return. So it's a really important thing to get right. Charlotte, very good. Let's move on. We'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Gam, who asks, what are the best training paths to become a cybersecurity professional?
All right, now depends on your budget here, Gam. But let's start off. We'll get a few thoughts on best. Mike, start us off, and then we'll hear from Patrick.
That's a very difficult one to answer, because the best path is really dependent on what area in cybersecurity you're going to go into, right? So there are education programs, college universities, master's programs, but there's all sorts of training out there, everything from awareness to skills training to process and procedure training. So it's really the individual has to identify what's the area they're looking to focus in, and then work with a professional. And it could be someone involved, like Mart, in a training organization. It could be somebody who's a practitioner, also working in training, like our organization, not to self-promote, but you need a coach to guide you through, based on what it is you're trying to do, what's the best path for you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much indeed. And Patrick?
The way the credentials are laid out in the NCSP program, depending upon your job role, you may be interested just in basic digital business risk awareness. You may have a foundational need to understand what the framework is, how the framework is structured, how a business stakeholder would think about understanding and assessing cyber risk so that they can make informed investment decisions. Maybe you're an implementer or an auditor, and your job is either to implement certain kinds of controls and to figure out all the activities you need to do to make that happen. Or you're an auditor and your question is, how would I validate that these controls work as they're intended to? And how would I prove that so that I could demonstrate the control was working effectively? And then you can actually become very specialized in using things like NIST 853 or ISO 27001 or the CIS controls to be able to apply a particular set of informative references, as the framework describes them, to help your organization apply the controls. So there are lots of different types of training programs out there, and there's a lot of different levels depending upon your particular interest.
Yeah, absolutely right. I love that idea of having a coach or a mentor. Most of these roles really, they did exist, but they weren't called what they're now called. And the scope and the depth and the breadth of the work was very different when I was earlier on in my career. So, this has very much evolved during certainly my kind of working lifetime. And I think that it's such a fast moving area that really do reach out to somebody who has a little bit of experience and can help guide you a wee bit, because that will help you figure out what you really are passionate about, what you really enjoy, and help you just kind of guide you a little bit, in the right direction. It's always super useful, isn't it? Even, in even Hansel and Gretel, I think from memory, then they kind of drop little bits of breadcrumbs on the way to kind of find their way. So you always need somebody dropping those breadcrumbs for you. All right, very good, excellent. Let's go on, please, if we can, and we'll take our next question. Charlotte.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Martin Robertson, sorry. Is NIST applicable in the UK?
All right, David, start us off, please, if you could.
I attended a conference that NIST was running on Wednesday of this week, in which they were gaining or getting community input into the next version of NIST, which will probably be out in a year or two. And they made a point of saying that there were over 7,000 registrants from around the world, not just in the United States, and over 2,100 actual participants in a live Schlag discussion. And one of the panels specifically dealt with internationalization, so that NIST recognizes that the CSF framework that was originally created first in 2014 and then updated in 2018 to address United States critical infrastructure like transportation, fuel, pipelines, electric grid, etc., has gained traction worldwide. There were a number of people, literally, I think almost every country in the world was represented. So that the question, is NIST applicable in the UK? Based upon what NIST told us, it's applicable everywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I completely echo that. The APMG has the luxury of working with quite a range of organizations in different countries around the world. And in doing so, we get an insight into what is working locally. Which of the international standards are being adopted in different countries? How are they being applied? And particularly in those areas where you're working in an industry which is highly regulated. I think it's hugely challenging for the folks working in financial services, whether you're in capital markets or retail banking, insurance, wherever you sit on that spectrum, for you to be able to find that right balance and think carefully about, where you go kind of next and how you take your organization appropriately on that journey. There is, of course, a great deal of commonality between what one government promotes and another government promotes, because an international standard is just that. It's a standard. So it's bound to have a lot of commonality kind of around the world. But I think you'll find more and more now that the leading national cybersecurity centers have a much, much more in common than they perhaps might have said explicitly some years ago. So it's very worthwhile looking into this and thinking about where your organization sits in the value chain with other multinationals as well. So great question. Thank you so much, Martin. Really, really interesting question and highly relevant for today's panel. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on then, Charlotte. In fact, it would be good to just check in and see what our audience is doing online. So Charlotte, bring us up to date with that.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a gentleman from India, Ventikash, is joining us. We also have Winifred joining us. I'm not sure where Winifred is joining us from, but you're very welcome. And we have many other, Nishita joining from Bangalore. So very welcome. I think she might be a friend of the family, to be honest, as well. So thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, very good indeed. Lovely to welcome you all. Thank you for submitting your questions. We've got some really good questions stacking up for the panel to answer. Let's crack on and we'll take our next question, please.
So the next question is from Faith, which is a live question that's been added in the chat. Is the framework being aligned with international cybersecurity initiatives and standards?
Okay, Patrick, your comment, please.
So one of the really useful things about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, when it was created, it was very clear as part of its charter not to reinvent any wheels. And so the bottom layer of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework describe a set of outcomes that an organization is trying to achieve, and then uses a series of pointers to look at other referenceable standards and resources that people can leverage and use. So these incorporate links to ISO 27001, to CIS controls, to NIST 853, PCI DSS, and a number of other areas. As they are updating the NIST cybersecurity framework, as David alluded to earlier, they're working on number 2.0 right now. One of the things that will inevitably happen is that those informative reference links will be updated to reflect all of the additional informative references that have been generated since 2018.
All right, thank you so much indeed. David?
And to answer the question a little bit differently than Patrick, although what he said is point on, the NIST, the development of the NIST cybersecurity framework has a different charter as a framework than a standards organization. It takes longer to change the standard. So the standards are going to be somewhat lagging behind, whereas the framework gets updated on an as-needed basis. But again, one of the things that came out of one of the panel discussions, again, the internationalization panel on Wednesday, was the fact that there already are what they call crosswalks to map the framework back to other standards that exist. And in fact, one of the appendix in the current 1.1 framework does that mapping to COBIT, to NIST standards, to ISO, and to the CIS controls that Patrick had referred to earlier. And the plan is to maintain that type of backward compatibility by providing those types of crosswalks. And NIST is also doing work now to deal with creating those crosswalks for the existing standard to others. So it's not that they're trying to align with the international standards, but rather provide a way of mapping what the framework recommends to what the standards describe as requirements.
Right, understand. Mike, your thoughts on this one, please.
Yeah, I would just like to mention that Faith was one of my cybersecurity interns this summer. And so I'm proud of her and see what our young minds are coming up with some great questions. We had all 4 interns went through the NIST Cybersecurity Professional training out of the DVMS Institute. They did an 800-171 assessment on our organization as part of their project. They presented it to all of their professors just this past Friday. And I can tell you they were actually absolutely blown away by how well these interns did. So just kudos to Faith. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. It's really good. And it's an incredibly small world, Faith, as well. So thank you for contributing today. And I'm sure that other folks who are watching and listening, to this online are really grateful for that contribution. So thank you very much indeed. We look forward to following your career and, connecting with you and linking up with you on LinkedIn and so on. So very good. Charlotte, let's move on if we can, please, and take our next question.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from David Nichols. David is asking, how can an organisation use the NIST-CSF to create, protect and deliver digital business values?
All right. So specifically then, David, on the digital business value side, and then we'll come to Patrick.
This goes back to something that Mart and Mike and Patrick have mentioned in answers or alluded to in answers to previous questions, and that is that cybersecurity is an enterprise level responsibility. It can't be a bolt-on. The other aspect of that is that how do you create value that is not protected value? And if you go back to something that we said earlier about, pardon me, I would have muted myself if I had enough warning. The idea is that if cybersecurity is truly an aspect of quality, then you have to do both. You have to create value and also appropriately protect that value so that it's an enterprise responsibility. The NIST framework contributes to that by setting up a set of core functions to identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. It provides a set of tiers to deal with identifying what the organization is doing in terms of, is it doing it ad hoc or is it doing it in a very managed way? And it also establishes a set of profiles that deal with enabling the organization to understand where it is and where it's trying to get to in terms of target, so that it supports the life cycle of creating, protecting, and delivering. And in fact, the final point is that if an organization just focuses on the IT side and just look at what the IT folks are doing to deal with identify, detecting, protecting, et cetera, then it's missing the organizational context of creating and protecting value. Again, going back to something that was said real earlier, in that if you're developing software, you catch the bug at the beginning, it's cheaper. So that part of this whole issue, one of the things that the NIST-CSF does, and they say it explicitly in the executive summary, is that it's not really about technology, it's about risk. And that the issue of creating and protecting value is really about digital business risk management, so that it's a whole organization approach.
Thank you so much indeed, Patrick, and then Mart.
When you think about what's happening in digital evolution right now, it's literally a smorgasbord of everything senior business stakeholders love. There are opportunities for cost reductions, opportunities to serve new customers, opportunity to serve existing customers with new products and services. But if you can't deliver services that are safely protected, that value doesn't accrue. So digital business strategies have to align with cyber risk management strategies. That means that at an executive level, at a board level, you have to have a way to identify and prioritize investments so that we're making appropriate investments in cyber risk management hand in glove with making decisions about digital business investments and digital risk. So this cybersecurity framework provides a vehicle not just for cybersecurity professionals, but more broadly for business stakeholders to make informed decisions about risk and investment.
That's really great. Thank you so much. And Mark, final thoughts on this?
Just quickly, just the NIST Cyber Security Framework Professional training courses through APMG. I mean, they actually literally start off with this whole digital theme, so to speak, as in what is a digital enterprise, digital transformation, how to become digital. That we're in this digital era, and then of course then makes it into what does it mean for security. But it puts it in that perspective, just like somebody said. The future is now, but we're already living in a cyber society. And that's basically what this is all about.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, panel. And what a lovely question from David. You really got us thinking, and linking all of this together into value is so important, because it takes time to realize the value and you get back that return on all of our investment. So it's a really, really important point to stress. Thank you very much. I think we've got time to fit in probably 2 last questions, or maybe 3 if we hurry. So Charlotte, next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Agobu. Why is the recruitment process discouraging new professionals by way of requesting for a minimum of 2 to 3 years experience? How can organizations put these measures in place?
All right. Well, this is a really relevant question, isn't it? On the one hand, you can't get a job without experience. On the other hand, you can't get experience kind of without a job, if that makes sense. So, we've already heard from Mike a little bit earlier talking about the importance of internships, volunteering, these kinds of things. It's a super, super important, part of this. I guess one of the challenges is always, as organizations, for us to think about what is that onboarding ramp? What does it look like? And how do we actually find and identify aptitude of people who are early in their careers to bring them into these key roles and responsibilities. David, clearly you have the benefit of experience in this area as well. What are your thoughts? And then we'll hear from Patrick.
Nick, you said a lot of what I was going to say. There is this catch-22 of how do I get the experience to get the experience? And the part of the issue is that, and Mike talked about dealing with interns. For people that are just coming out of school or trying to start in this profession, volunteer. Find an organization and look to become an intern. While it may not be paid as much, it still is a way of helping to gain the experience. Look for a mentor. Look for an opportunity to shadow somebody working in that field that you want to be in. Project management also in some cases has the same type of, you need the experience. How do I get to be a project manager and it's a catch-22, but the point is, the way, I'm not sure I quite understand how organizations can put measures in place. What they're trying to do is hire the right people, and that in some cases is going to require some level of experience. So the real question is, how do you get it? And Mart talked about it earlier in terms of background checks. So it's important to be honest in dealing with the experience, because if the organization is going to do a background check, they're going to discover really quickly that there's a disconnect between what you said and what the reality is.
Indeed. Thank you so much indeed. Patrick, your thoughts?
So one of the problems organizations have in dealing with cybersecurity risk management is that they perceive this as, if I just hired the right person, then that right person could wave a wand and make all these pains go away, right? Either by hiring an employee or by throwing money at a consultancy. And if somebody could just wave a wand and make my problem go away, I'd really like that a lot. As you are probably all well aware, there is a wild skills shortage globally in people with a lot of experience in cybersecurity risk management, especially people with enough business acumen to understand not only how to manage the technical aspects of cyber risk, but more broadly, how to communicate that effectively in a business context. So we are working with organizations that are recruiting people who are coming out of the armed services or first responders or new graduates who are trying to help identify gateways into the industry. And cybersecurity, unlike a lot of other aspects of IT, is a place where organizations will probably have to be a little more flexible in bringing people in and having maybe not the same level of experience, but having rigorous credentials can be helpful in helping get your foot in the door.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Patrick. And it's all about that, leverage that network, attend events like this, build your network up, because the more people that you know, the more eyes and ears that you have, and somebody could recommend you for an opportunity. And I would really advise, if you can at all manage it, volunteer, even if it's only, don't dismiss 2 weeks worth of work experience with an organization. It's two weeks worth of time for you to be able to show what a genuine, committed, hardworking person you really are. And if you get that opportunity, then people will spot your talent, and it's all going to help. So well worthwhile doing, and I wish you every good piece of luck, a go with figuring that out and finding your way. So very good. Let's move on. Charlotte, I think we've got time for one last question, as we're kind of up against the clock a little bit, and let's take that one, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've actually got a couple of live questions to ask, but as you say, only time for one. This one is from Monica. Monica asks, would you recommend involving a change manager when developing/adapting a cybersecurity framework, and who would be genetic stakeholders from your experience?
All right. Okay. So I'm not sure if it's genetic or generic, but there we are. Mike, why don't you start us off, and then we'll hear from Patrick as he unravels the double helix of stakeholder engagement.
Awesome. Well, I would say I wouldn't recommend evolving the change manager. I would insist on it. I would make it mandatory.
Right.
There's too much of the change management process that impacts cybersecurity and how an organization is going to keep their devices, their components. But I'm going to take that a step further. As you do assessments, hopefully you have a compliance platform that you're working with. The the supporting artifacts to say yes, indeed, we do have this in place becomes an item, a configuration item that you want to manage. So I encourage my my clients to put even those supporting artifacts under change control. So when the IT organization is making changes within the environment, part of that change management process is to update the supporting artifact, add it to the compliance platform. The change management is critical to it. It's not an optional thing. It's got to be part of it.
Okay, thank you so much. Patrick, your thoughts?
I love the premise of the question, because the premise of the question aims not at technology, but at people, and more broadly at culture, going back to our very first question today, which is that we want cybersecurity and cyber risk management to be an integrated core competency of the organization. So from a stakeholder perspective, this begins with the board of directors. It begins with senior stakeholders and cascades through the entire organization, perhaps in different ways. So at certain points, part of a successful organizational change approach to thinking about cyber risk is to move this from being, as we've described, moving it from a bolt-on to an integrated part of how the organization thinks about strategy and risk together, so that the organization can both create and deliver valuable capabilities, but also protect them in the same mode. So I think, to Mike's point, I think that it's absolutely necessary that an organization have a coherent approach to thinking about how they need to work to move the culture in this direction. And again, any good culture change initiative really begins not with a culture change initiative, but more broadly with trying to solve a problem that's going to drive the cultural changes that you want.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. David, briefly, and then Mart, I think we can just fit you in.
Real quickly, one of the things that we propose both in the fundamentals book and in the practitioner book is combining strategy risk into a single entity so that neither strategy nor risk are ignored. Not only is a change manager important, but because we're talking about cybersecurity, which is really an enterprise risk issue, you need somebody with that strategy risk responsibility to make sure that any change is appropriately considered within that enterprise strategy risk context. Because failure to do that, you may be creating value, but you can't appropriately protect it without the risk considered.
Okay, thank you so much indeed. And Mart, final thoughts?
Just quickly, it's a great start that we talked about culture and then they're finishing with culture, and it's all about behaviors, mindset, like we started off. Reminds me of some organizations I ran into that the first meeting of the day typically had to start with a safety moment. Why not start with a security moment? You know, every first meeting of the day in
Great
your
idea.
job, have somebody, start off that way.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I really like that concept, because then you're bringing it into the ceremony. And human beings, we really work well with ceremony. It's part of our ancient brain as well as our modern brain, and joining in with things like that. So fantastic. What a great idea. Thank you so much, Mark. Really, really good. Well, look, everybody, it's been fascinating today. We've had a really, kind of rocket ship ride through everything to do with the NIST Cyber Security Framework. Let's get some closing remarks, if we may. Patrick, we'll come to you first, and then we'll hear from Mike.
So I want to just thank the panel and thank you, Nick, for coordinating today's program, and for everybody online who've been contributing questions. Eventually, the biggest mental shift that has to go on is thinking about cyber risk as an inherent part of life now. And so every person needs some level of digital business risk awareness. And every organization needs to think about digital value in terms of creation of outcomes for customers and stakeholders, but also protection at the same time in order to ensure that that value is realized.
Thank you so much. And Mike, and
Awesome.
then David.
Yes, Nick, my thanks to you as well. I really enjoyed being a part of this. Based on the number of questions that went unanswered, I would suggest we pull this together again and do it again. It was a great time. One closing thought, and it goes back to the developing that expertise within the organization, especially for those that don't have the years of expertise. So I'm speaking to the organizations and organizational leaders. Look to the colleges, look to the universities, look to folks that are coming back from, maybe they're military veterans or frontline workers, whatever, but they're looking to get into cybersecurity. Take them on, invest in them, the training, because there's a shortage out there and it's hard to find really good professionals that are focused in this area. The area of cybersecurity is so broad. There's so many different areas. So bringing on interns, exposing them to different things will give them a great start, be it fresh out of college or somebody who's been in the field for a while. And as a very real example, 4 of my interns this summer, in September, I'm bringing one on, and she's gonna do an outstanding job. So I really appeal to the organizational leaders to invest in so that we can grow this or fill this industry gap that's out there.
It's so very, very important, isn't it? It really is. And it's a mutually beneficial approach as well. David, and then Mart, if we can.
A lot of organizations, unfortunately, view cybersecurity as if there's a silver bullet that will fix it, whether that's a tool or adding additional people or something else. And really, one of the things that we tried to do with the NIST Cybersecurity Professional Certification Program is introduce a different way of thinking, new mental models that takes this to the enterprise level, not the IT level, to think differently about cybersecurity, to think in terms of strategy risk as a single entity so that you don't have a strategy that's floating out there and without being appropriately included in aspects of risk. So that the real fundamental issue, and everybody, both in closing and in earlier remarks, alluded to it, and that is cybersecurity enterprise level responsibility that starts with the culture at the top to encourage people to see something, say something.
Absolutely. Thank you so much indeed. Critical advice there and excellent closing remark. Mart and then Charlotte, please.
We talk about cybersecurity professionals. I think anyone working for an organization should be a cybersecurity professional. Just that mindset, because there's this quote. I hope that this resonates for a little bit. A good cybersecurity professional is somebody who always looks both ways before crossing a one-way street.
That's good.
That's fantastic. I'm going to write that one down. Okay, that is a definite takeaway from today. Thank you so much, Mark. Brilliant. Charlotte, your reflections on today's event.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you to our panelists. Couldn't have done it without you. And thank you to our live contributors, Diane, Orion, Martin, Gam, Faith, David, and Agubu and Monica. We've had a question in the chat about whether this is being recorded. Yes, it is recorded, and yes, it will be available on the apmginternational.com YouTube channel shortly afterwards.
All right, well, excellent. Well, look, thank you very much indeed. And on behalf of everybody in the audience, thank you so much, panel, for all of your strong contributions. I'd like to thank everybody who's been online for your amazing questions today. And over on our website, of course, you can search for the answers to more than 1,400 questions. It's a comprehensive free resource. It connects you with more than 140 experts from all around the world in different disciplines and from different business verticals. Don't forget, you can also listen to the audio recorded version of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Now then, next week on Monday, we're going to be discussing about how do you go about building a culture of inclusivity in your organization. And we've got a fantastic expert and inspirational panel joining us for that conversation. So please do join us. Friday the 26th, then we're going to move on and start talking about leadership. And in particular, how do you lead in an agile environment? Subscribe to the show, and we will, of course, send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thank you so much to our producers who have been online today. It's been really brilliant. Watch out for your name in the credits to follow. Take care. We'll see you next time.